We are excited to welcome two of our own team members. Nicole Gregg has a background in behavioral neuroscience with a focus on cognition and aging. Jordan Hamlin holds a BA in psychology and began her neurofeedback work in Asheville, North Carolina.
We wanted to look at how providers were incorporating the Neuradiant 1070 specifically into their practices. We were really curious about how other people are going about this. 7 of the 12 providers actually said that they use their helmet with 50% or more of their client population.
I would frankly have every one of my clients have a helmet.
The top most reported condition was dementia, but it was also kind of surprising just to see this wide variety of conditions that people reported.
This is my favorite slide here, talking about our success stories. Common improvements they see is a reduction in headache and reduction in brain fog, a huge reduction in her anxiety.
Within 2 weeks, she said she experienced a clarity and that she was feeling much better. She was very happy with the results so far.
We are excited to welcome two of our own team members today as our speakers. First, Nicole Gregg has a background in behavioral neuroscience from UBC with a focus on cognition and aging. She's conducted research both in mental health and aging-related cognition, and she leads the clinical integration at Neuronic. She also supports our clinical trial on mild cognitive impairment and works as a neurofeedback technician. And joining Nicole is Jordan Hamlin. Jordan holds a BA in psychology from Georgia State University and began her neurofeedback work in Asheville, North Carolina. She's a BCIA certified neurofeedback technician and a qEEG certified through IQCB and a heart math trainer. Jordan has been researching how light impacts the human body, especially its effects on EEG activity since 2020. She joined Neuronic in 2024, where she now serves as a consultant and researcher. So please welcome Nicole and Jordan. And the presentation will be about 45 minutes, followed by Q&A. And if you could hold your questions to the end. If you have anything specific to ask, just pop it in the chat and we'll get to it at the end. I'll hand it over to you guys.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for joining us today. So we're going to talk today about a research project that Nicole and I conducted in the winter of last year. Some of you might have participated in this. Some of you might just be hearing about this for the first time. But really, we wanted to look at how providers were incorporating the Neuradiant 1070 specifically into their practices. You know, we, both Nicole and I are consultants for Neuronic. We know our own approach or how we're integrating and what we're recommending for providers, but we were really curious about how other people are going about this. So we wanted to get a greater understanding ultimately of, are they incorporating it, how they're doing it, if it's a standalone modality, those kinds of things, to learn how providers are perceiving our device and the company, to understand what we're doing well or any areas that we could improve in. We wanted to find what clients that the providers are using the helmet with the most or the least to help guide future research efforts on efficacy with certain populations or demographics, safety, feasibility, and understanding what outcomes the clinicians are experiencing with clients to provide insight for managing expectations for end users and other providers as well. So we set up this study first, and I won't go through all of these, but we had a list of about 92 providers that we reached out to. We provided an incentive of either a free 30-minute provider education session or a $50 Amazon gift card. We had both qualitative and quantitative analysis of this data, and in this outcomes, we found, how providers were using it, perceived efficacy, metrics that were used, and recommendations for product improvement. I do want to point out that I'm not going to go through every question that we asked our providers through this, but we'll highlight some of the ones that we found most interesting. So first, just to give you kind of a background on who we were looking at, most of the providers were located in the United States. We did have one provider in Canada and one in the Netherlands as well. Obviously, we're pointing this out just because it could potentially have skewed some of this since most of our providers are located in the US. The backgrounds included neurofeedback providers, counselors and therapists, psychologists, and photobiomodulation consultants. We did have a criteria that providers had to be using the Neuradiant 1070 in their clinic for at least 3 months. But the shortest length of time any of the providers have been using it was 6 months, the longest length of time being 3 years. And interestingly, 8 of the 12 providers had already been using the helmet for longer than 1 year. So first we were asking the providers about the frequency of use. So one was, how many clients do you see per week? And of these, how many are you using the helmet with? 7 of the 12 providers actually said that they use their helmet with 50% or more of their client population. So a pretty wide variety. We also ask, on average, how many days per week are your clients using the Neuradiant 1070? 8 of the 12 providers reported their clients are using the helmet 2 to 3 days a week. I do just want to point out in this graph that we have here, we have 2 days only, 3 days only, and 2 to 3 days. There was a variety of these answers, but obviously the most common was in between that range of 2 to 3, or 3 days. We inferred that the providers who reported clients using the helmet 5 to 7 days a week were likely clients who are using the helmet at home rather than coming into a clinic daily. We also asked about how providers were integrating the device into the clinic, this being a standalone modality combined with another modality like neurofeedback or both, and providers were able to choose both responses here. We inferred that most of the providers who reported both options have clients who are likely using the helmet at home as well as in their clinic. We asked, do your clients use the device in the clinic, rent the device from you, or use it at home? And again, providers could choose multiple options. Most of the providers did report that their clients purchased the device to use at home, but this was closely followed by using the device in the clinic. It's pretty even on this one, which we were kind of surprised about. What was also interesting was to see that a third of the providers are implementing a rental model. This was just an interesting find because we don't normally talk about this often as models for businesses, but we are seeing that more and more providers are starting to implement this into their practice. We asked about the age demographics as well, and providers, again, were able to choose multiple responses. It was kind of unsurprising to us that we found the majority, or all of our providers reported using it with older adults, 65 and up, and you kind of saw this trend decreasing as that age was decreasing. Nonetheless, we still had a significant amount of providers who were using it with children, which was something that we weren't quite expecting. And we asked about what conditions that the providers were using it for. Just to make a note, Neuronic devices are not intended to treat, cure, or diagnose any medical conditions. They're intended to support well-being. Here, providers again could choose multiple options. The top most reported condition was dementia, which we definitely assumed since most of the research is around using infrared light with dementia or Alzheimer's. But it was very closely followed by both TBI and ADHD. There's definitely research that's out here supporting use for both of these, so it certainly is a great population to use, but it was interesting to find that that was almost as frequently used for the helmet as dementia was. But it was also kind of surprising just to see this wide variety of conditions that people reported. You can see all of these listed down here, things from autism spectrum, multiple sclerosis, bipolar, epilepsy, even schizophrenia. So it was a really, really wide variety of conditions. So we started asking them too, as well, what are the clinical indications for excluding use of the Neuradiant 1070? And if any, what is the rationale? We kind of had 2 responses that came up as the most commonly reported. One was stroke. So people did want to have at least some buffer with it, or they were a little bit more concerned about specifically hemorrhagic stroke. I did want to point out that research shows that photobiomodulation can support recovery from stroke, including improving functionality as well as supporting repair of damaged tissue. And while there is research, limited research around hemorrhagic stroke, there is some evidence that it could reduce incidence of hemorrhaging. However, we recommend waiting on average at least 3 months after a hemorrhagic stroke before using transcranial photobiomodulation. The other commonly reported condition was epilepsy and seizure. Interestingly enough, the research has shown that photobiomodulation can actually be helpful for these conditions by reducing seizure activity in the brain, reducing severity and frequency of seizures, and mitigating damage caused by the seizures. We also see that pulsing does not appear to impact seizure activity and is generally considered safe for these populations. No matter what, one thing we do just as an extra caution is just to avoid exposure to the indicator lights in the helmet, which are those red lights that are inside of the 1070. And just to uh, make sure that you're being careful about it, it's both, if you're putting it onto the person and in fact the helmet's facing them, or if you're using it over the face. We asked about the specific protocols or settings that are used with the device. And again, providers could choose multiple. It wasn't surprising to us to find that the majority, of course, are using preset protocols. These have the most research around them, and it's why we put them on the device. So certainly wasn't anything that was unexpected. But we had the majority of the providers also using clinical protocols, which is a really great thing to be able to see. That can show a level of comfort using the helmet. And half of them were using custom programs as well. It's something that we kind of talk about maybe the least with a lot of our providers. We usually talk more about presets and then clinical protocols, but it was great again to see this level of comfort at using a custom protocol as well. And we had the providers rank the use of the preset protocols. So the first most used was glow, followed by peace, focus, and the last one being energize or balance. And that depends on which generation of the device that you have. Energize was that 20 hertz, balance is that 14 hertz. It was interesting to find this because we did note that all of the providers were using the helmet for dementia and individuals over the age of 65 plus. So we kind of expected there to be more use of the focus preset. So having it ranked third was just sort of an interesting finding on here. Glow is definitely one that we do kind of recommend as a crowd pleaser oftentimes though. So it's not that surprising that it ended up being the first one. So now I'll go ahead and pass it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Jordan. So we then went on to ask providers how long it took them to see results from using the Neuradiant 1070, and the median response was about 5 sessions, which equaled to about 2 weeks. And we chose to use the median here instead of the average to reduce the impact of any outlier responses because that would kind of result in a misrepresented data set. Now, we did scale this with how often each provider was seeing their client per week. So for example, provider 3 said that they were seeing their client twice per week and it took them 4 sessions to see results, meaning that equaled about 2 weeks. Whereas provider 6, was seeing their client every day and noticed changes within 7 to 14 sessions. So that would also mean about 1 to 2 weeks for this provider. All right, and then we asked our providers, do your clients experience any overstimulation reactions? And 9 providers reported that very few clients experience overstimulation, and 3 providers report having no clients experiencing any overstimulation reactions. However, the providers that did report that there was overstimulation reactions seen reported that the most common one was a headache, and the second was dizziness. And providers also remarked at the course of the interview that this was kind of an expected and manageable part of the process. Whenever you're using a type of technology, you can expect side effects and things like that. So with an adjustment of dosing or provided supportive care, it was manageable. And there's a few theories as to why overstimulation would occur. The first being that near-infrared light can impact cellular water viscosity, which increases cellular production, but can also dehydrate the cell without proper water consumption. So when we're working with providers or clients one-on-one, we always recommend that they drink a glass of water before using the device to ensure that any dehydration doesn't occur, and that can result in, obviously, a headache. The second theory here is that unnecessary reactive gliosis is a superimposed mechanism. And so this is kind of just a notion of maybe it's not too much of one type of stimulation, but rather a second mechanism that's superimposed over the first one, reactive gliosis being basically the brain's response to an injury in the brain. So if that's unnecessarily activated, that could result in some overstimulation reactions as well. And then the third here is a bit more anecdotal, and it's just that some clients are just more sensitive than others. So if you have clients that are sensitive to other interventions or modalities or neuromodulation, they might be sensitive to this type of intervention as well. We also have noticed that people with dysautonomia can get overstimulated very easily. So starting them at a very low dose is very important. So if you're kind of setting them up with even just one of the presets, they might get overstimulated from that, even though the presets are a relatively low dose to start with. And then the last one here is just people with anxiety tend to be a bit more sensitive to different sensory things. So we've noticed that that can be a population of sensitive clients as well. We then asked our providers, what kind of metrics do you use in your practice to assess the effectiveness of the Neuradiant 1070? And our most common response at 25% was qEEGs. And this was shortly followed by client feedback at 21.9%. This is no surprise to us because as Jordan was introducing the provider population, a lot of the providers were involved with neurofeedback. And as we know, qEEGs are heavily used in neurofeedback. So this is no surprise that about a quarter of responses involved qEEG. We also had other bins, so cognitive assessment, including the MoCA test, CNS Vital Signs, neuropsych evaluations, so something like the mini mental state exam or continuous performance task, biometrics, which included basically just HRV, clinical scales, so condition-based questionnaires like Beck's depression scale or Rivermead concussion questionnaire, things like that. And then other was kind of just an ambiguous bin to include other things like sleep scales and family feedback. So then we asked our providers on a scale of 1 to 5, how comfortable do you feel using the device with your clients? And 1 was not at all comfortable and 5 were very comfortable. So most providers, being 10 out of 12 providers, say that they are very comfortable using the device with clients, and we had no scores below a 4. Now, as Jordan mentioned in the beginning, these providers have been using the device for as little as 6 months and as long as 3 years. So these scores might be a bit lower if you were asking a new user who's still getting acclimatized to using this technology, how comfortable they feel. So that's just something to keep in mind there. All right, this is my favorite slide here, talking about our success stories and just some feedback we got from providers and their success stories. So provider 1 works with people with head injuries and migraines and sees the most changes with them. Common improvements they see is a reduction in headache and reduction in brain fog. Provider 2 here has a client using it for her concussion and noticed a huge reduction in her anxiety. Another client loves the PEACE protocol for sleep, and the biggest success story is of the provider who had suffered a concussion herself about a year ago. She bought the helmet for herself because she'd noticed that her short-term memory, she had short-term memory loss. She used the helmet, and within 2 months, she noticed that she had recovered. She then decided that she would provide this to her clients as well. And this is a very common story we see with providers, is oftentimes they will either get the device for themselves or get the device with the intention of using it for clients, but want to try it on themselves first. They notice great improvements, and then they want to implement it for their clients. And I think that's obviously a great approach as well. And then the third provider here has seen people come out of lifelong depressions from using the helmet in a few weeks. They've also seen amazing recovery seen in those with traumatic brain injury. They had one case with a gunshot wound victim who had lost verbal abilities. And after using the device, his mood had now changed. He started walking again and communicates more and has been a lot more verbal, which is great to see. Provider 4 here had a client who was very impaired, a military veteran, and he used the helmet for 10 days on the glow setting before he received a clinical protocol. And one of his therapists actually called this provider 4, and asked what they were doing differently because he's been doing a lot of things he was not able to do since 2.5 years ago. So that was definitely a great improvement. And it's also exceptional when you have other providers noticing differences as well. Provider 5 here had one person with dementia who initially could not say many words except for good and yes. And in the beginning, she was only able to read something, but now after using the helmet for a few months, the client has been able to say a lot more. The client has been trying to communicate a lot more, and she's been using the focus protocol. And then finally, provider 6 here had a patient with Lewy body dementia and has been using the helmet for a year, and he's gotten better with details, and the provider claims that they've noticed that his dementia has slowed down quite a bit as well. All right, moving on to some limitations of this study. So obviously with any study that you're looking at, it comes with its limitations and successes as well. So the first limitation here is provider recall. So because we were interviewing these providers on the spot, they might have had a hard time recalling specific examples, or they might have provided a more accurate answer if they were going through chart notes and indicating data from there. So for example, when we asked them how long it takes to see results, they were kind of just recalling this from memory instead of, going through case-by-case scenarios of when this happened. Limitation 2 is that participants were taken from Neuronic's database, so they may be biased to more positive experiences. We've nurtured these relationships. Various employees from Neuronic have talked to them, so that could bias the results to a more positive experience. And the third limitation here is that the sample size was primarily limited to the field of psychology, counseling, and neurofeedback. And that is a huge demographic of people that we work with. However, we also work with physiotherapists, occupational therapists, functional medicine, neurologists, you name it, we work with it. So to extrapolate these results to the broader population might be a bit difficult. And some of these answers, for example, like the one about qEEGs being the most popular metric, may be biased to this field as well. The fourth limitation here is the small sample size. We did only have 12 people in this study, so it is hard to generalize results. And the fifth limitation is that research was conducted by employees of Neuronic. And so participants may have felt the subconscious need to respond favorably. So these interviews took place over a video call. So when you're talking with one of the employees of the device you're talking about over a video call, they might have felt the need to respond a bit more on the positive side. We did try to mitigate this by sending out an anonymous feedback survey to report anything that they did not feel comfortable disclosing in the interview. So it would all be anonymous and we would just get the feedback directly, but we didn't have anyone respond to this form as well. So. All right, implications of this study. The first and probably most obvious is that we really get practical insight into the use of the Neuradiant 1070. I think all of us at Neuronic can agree. We see the behind the scenes a lot. We know what goes into the device, but oftentimes we don't have that hands-on experience with either providers or clients directly. So we're not actually seeing the day-to-day of how these clinics are using the device. So this was really great to see the kind of behind the curtains of the clinical use of it. It also, the second implication is that we can focus research and educational materials on popular conditions that providers are using the device with. So as Jordan shared, dementia, TBI, and ADHD seem to be the most popular. So this can help direct our research and educational efforts to more of these conditions as well. The third here is that it influences the way Neuronic employees talk to providers and give guidance. So at Neuronic, I'm a clinical integration specialist, so I work with a lot of providers using their devices in clinic. And so I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been able to pull stats from this study to share experiences or hard numbers as to how the device is actually being integrated. And it can help providers get more hands-on real-life experience with how other providers are using the device as well. And then the fourth implication here is that there were areas for improvement that were brought up as well to enhance clinician comfortability. So more education on ongoing research in the field of PBM. These can kind of guide our next steps as a company and help us to make the device more applicable to people as well. Areas for future research. So the first one here is how different country laws dictate how PBM is integrated into practices. So as we saw in the beginning, 10 of these 12 providers were located in the United States, 1 in Canada, and 1 in the Netherlands. So looking at different country laws and even state laws can differ from state to state or province to province. So just looking at how these different laws would dictate how PBM and other technologies that are similar are integrated into practice can kind of give some insight as to either how willing providers are to integrate it into their practices or different outcomes or how things are measured even. So that's one area of future research. The second here is that studies for different types of conditions can be focused on the most popular ones from this study. So again, dementia, TBI, and ADHD being the most popular, that can be kind of an area for future research for us. There's also potential for larger studies using the app data from the Light device. So the Light device here is our other device that we offer. And instead of having a physical controller, we administer protocols through an app. So this can allow usage data to be tracked and can be used for future research as well. The fourth area for future research would be using metrics from providers to note improvements. So kind of getting ideas as to how providers are measuring improvements. We can kind of integrate that into our research as well. And the fifth is exploring other potential metrics. So different biomarkers that could indicate improvements from PBM. ApoE4 testing, for example, as a biomarker for Alzheimer's disease could indicate proactive use of PBM. So just kind of taking a look at other potential metrics and biomarkers that we can integrate into future research. So that kind of takes us to the end of this presentation. Those were our references, and we kind of wanted to open the floor for discussion, both in terms of any questions that you guys might have for us or kind of discussing these two questions. The first being the main populations we found providers work with most are dementia, TBI, and ADHD. Does this resonate with the populations you see as well? Do you have other populations that you work more closely with? Feel free to share your experiences. And the second question is, have you had any success stories using Neuronic devices? We would love to hear from you. So I'll open the floor for any questions at this time or discussion.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Jordan. I see Patricia here right in front of me. I don't know, Patricia, do you have any feedback on or any experiences you'd like to share?
Yeah, number one, one of my clients received a helmet, and within 2 weeks said that she apparently had been given information from one of her doctors that she had more plaque than a usual 55-year-old. So I encouraged her to get the helmet. She got the helmet. She started using it. I just did a plain protocol with her, starting out at glow and focus, the 40 hertz. And so within 2 weeks, she said she experienced a clarity and that she was feeling much better. And so that, again, she was very happy with the results so far. So I didn't speak to her this week, so I don't know whether she had any further thing to say, but now I believe she was using that every day, once a day or once or twice a day. I can't remember which. But in any case, the dehydration part that you mentioned is very important, because what I had the very first time I used it with my cousins who were 82-year-old twins, I had a heck of a time getting them to drink water. So I got to the point where I set out a bottle of water and I insisted. But one of the twins, who apparently went back to Maine where he lives, and he has a daughter who supposedly has been monitoring him, but I have not been monitoring him closely. And so he loves it. Apparently he's using it every day. It has not impacted his memory, for which I am very surprised. But he feels better. He likes it. He uses it. I don't really care. So somewhere along the line, I expect that his memory is going to improve somewhat, or it may be so slowly that he doesn't recognize it. So I don't know which, but I will start keeping a little more track of that. The other thing, that one of the twins who was also using it did not have dementia. The first one did have dementia and had severe memory problem. The other one called me to wonder about how come his scalp was very heated. And I asked him to back off for whatever, because it was a concern for him. And I find that when I use glow, that my scalp gets not too warm, that's uncomfortable, but it doesn't bother me because I really understand a lot about what's going on, and I don't really pay much attention to that. Do not see it as negative, but apparently he did. It may have been more heated for him, and it may be a function of dehydration. I don't know how come that cue just seems to elude me in terms of making sure that I follow up with that with excuse me, each client that's using it. I've just had two clients. Actually, the husband is the significant other is not my client, but he's an 88-year-old man who really does have memory problems. And they've just started. So I have no data as yet on whether this is impacted, but they're both using it. She is in her late 50s or 60s, I'm sorry. And so I don't have enough data to give you any feedback on that. I would frankly have every one of my clients have a helmet if I could. So in any case, it's because I believe in the basic science that's behind this. And as I say, and I think I've mentioned many times, that I have been using red light therapy, starting with V-Light and going on to Neuronic for probably close to 8 years. And I would not want to be without it, quite frankly, because I can tell, because I'm now 90. And once I stop using it for a brief period of time, I can tell that my my recall deteriorates. Not bad, but it's nonetheless that it's noticeable. Because now it takes me 3 seconds to get something back into my memory, whereas before it seemed to be a little more instantaneous. So that's, I think that's pretty much all I have to say today.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Patricia. And I know we've heard that before about the glow protocol kind of heating up a bit. There's a couple things. One is that the padding on the helmet can kind of trap heat. So if you have, like, sometimes people will pad the whole perimeter of the helmet instead of just doing 1, 2, 3, 4. So sometimes that can allow for a bit more airflow. And
That's
the
a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, and the second thing too is that if you use a clinical protocol, like to create basically similar to a glow protocol, what you can do is do like 2 minutes of glow, a break, 2 minutes of glow, a break as a stepwise process, and then cycle through it as well to help with the cooling, just because the breaks will help dissipate the
Okay.
heat faster.
Is there what I didn't never have thought to ask?
Mhm.
Is it how far do you need to keep the red light from touching the scalp, or is it okay for it to touch the scalp or not?
Yeah, it's best to keep it as close to the scalp as possible.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it doesn't
without
matter if
discomfort,
it
of
touches
course.
the scalp, it's okay.
Yeah, it's ideal that you have
Good,
as little distance as possible.
good. Okay, thank you. That really answers a question I've had for a while. Forget to ask.
No problem.
Oh, well, I have to go back to using my helmet again.
The other thing I
Hey,
wanted to ask about was with your client who you mentioned had the plaques in the brain, was she experiencing any symptoms or was it just a biomarker that
lots.
the doctor?
Lots, Nicole. She was disorganized. She's a teacher, was a former principal, and recognized that something was going on with her brain and was really quite frightened about the whole thing. And she is not experiencing that as we speak. I still see her on a weekly basis for regular cognitive therapy. So that I keep in touch with her and I will be following her, and I think that this is going to be very good for her. What happened is that I was able to get a qEEG on her. However, she had so much muscle interference at T3, T4 that it really negated anything that we could find to to set up a protocol for her. So I kept her to whatever, and what I'll do is add uh, to do the glow twice or to do the focus. I do the gamma trainer for me because I've got it set up as a as a custom program, but my custom program is only set up for 3 minutes. I haven't changed that yet, but I do that 5 times. So I do that much whenever I'm training myself. So what I do is I add or subtract in case if it doesn't seem there seems to be any kinds of problems. As long as there's no problems, then basically I know it will not be increased infinitesimally. I mean, it just won't, but we will just see what happens. Because I haven't really done that with other people long enough to really know how to proceed. But your information has been very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I just wanted to point out too, one of the things, and you mentioned about the hydration is like it is, an issue. I think it's an issue anyway when you're working with some of the dementia, you know, clients, period, it can come up. So one of the things I have been trying to kind of push with it is like, okay, if you can't actually get somebody to like drink, real water, which is, the ideal, if you can get something that's a little bit of a flavoring or just something else so they're still getting something hydrating, it's just so much more worth it than, if you're trying to force it and it's not happening and it, becomes a whole fight or whatever else. As long as they can get something hydrating, just trying to get away from that like caffeine. I had a client who drank alcohol before using the helmet, did not go well. Like getting away from any of those things, just something that's possibly hydrating makes such a difference.
Well, that actually you reminded me, Jordan, of the fact that the first twin that I did this with, who did have dementia, was a coffee addict. And so, and he did drink. I mean, he quote unquote obeyed my instruction about drinking a bottle of water, but he had to have his caffeine. And so I forgot how dehydrating that is, because I don't drink coffee, so I don't even think about it. But hydration was always an issue with neurofeedback as well. I did that for 25 years. So it was it's easy to forget, and I need to continue to remind myself about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I have some of my clients who've just like put a sticky note on the actual device itself that just
That's
says
a
like
thought.
drink water. Like, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thanks.
Any other questions? I'm just trying to see if anyone. Will, you have a question or comment?
Yes, no, great presentation, guys. Very insightful. I have one question. Um, I saw the theories for overstimulation, and I think it was partly answered, and I think it might be partly answered, regarding the sensitivity of clients. But I was wondering if anyone discussed the nocebo effect, and if anyone discussed that, yeah, with you.
I don't think I had anybody who discussed it exactly. I do think that's a part of it, especially when we're looking at some of like the anxiety stuff. I mean, you have a highly traumatized person. Like, I think there's it's already scary just putting a helmet on them. And that's part of why, we talk about just trying to kind of ease them in. But I do also think there is something like with the dysautonomia. I mean, I have quite a few POTS people, and they tolerate like 10 seconds and get up to this maximum of like a minute and 45 seconds or something. And they're getting amazing benefits from it. So I do think there's something that's very real there. That's just a different, biology aspect. But yeah, that's a good, point to bring up too, Will.
There's actually, I was reading and writing about this the other week, about how cognitive distortions in people with depression can actually affect outcomes. And so yeah, kind of along the same lines of like, if you're expecting that nothing good will ever happen to you, then you're less likely to see any positive results as well. And there's a lot of robust research around how these cognitive distortions can affect clinical outcomes in people with depression. Obviously, that's one just specific population, but yeah, for the population at large, that I can't apply that. But yeah, nobody brought it up in my interviews at least.
Yeah.
Do you have experience, Will, with that?
Yeah, well, I think
Clients?
we discussed it before. I was just curious if any other clinician had brought it up during the study, because I know we've discussed it, but it was interesting to see that potentially no one has discussed it. Yeah.
Mhm.
I've got another question then for you guys. So with what you've learned in the provider interviews or even since then, are there any combination modalities that just really stood out that they thought was most effective, or any creative ways to pair the Neuradiant 1070 with other interventions?
I mean, I think neurofeedback's the most obvious one, obviously. Like, I think just by the mechanism of it, like PBM is really pouring that energy and putting gas in the tank, and then neurofeedback's doing the fine tuning. I know that there's some clinicians that will do a lot of visual stuff while they're doing PBM, and some will do HRV combined. But yeah, I don't know, Jordan, if you have other input too.
Well, I think one of the things that I thought is kind of interesting is, yeah, the different like ways that providers are doing it. So some of the providers, especially ones that were maybe reporting that their clients were using it more frequently, but not 5 to 7 days, they were like setting it up as a pod inside of their office. So rather than having it be part of the actual session and taking up time in that, people could come in and do these, helmet sessions in these pods and then go into their neurofeedback. And I thought that was a really clever idea of how to set it up, because certainly when I was using the helmet in my clinic, I just did it, in the session. So I kind of had to figure out the timing with all of that. So yeah, it was interesting to kind of see just the different ways that it was being utilized as, literally in the session together, or if there was some kind of separation between the two.
I think another really interesting avenue is that's coming out is combining PBM with cognitive behavioral therapy, or more like talk therapy approaches. And I know that there was one study that found that using PBM in addition to CBT would would decrease depressive symptoms by, I think it was about 30%. And I was like, that's a very interesting study. And then I was talking with a marriage and family counselor, and he was saying, he was just like, I don't know if I was just like seeing things, but he's like, I've been working with this married couple for months now, and I haven't been able to get them to actually talk to each other without like getting angry. And he was like, I tried using the device on them, and during that session, it was the first time they were able to actually speak to one another and like remain calm during it. So I think that's a really interesting application as well, because you don't really think about the applications to talk therapies. You kind of just expect the integration with other modalities like neurofeedback or HRV or whatever it is. Patricia?
Yeah, basically what a question that I had forgotten to ask before is I was curious as to how 2 times a week, does it take longer? It would seem like it would take longer for results to occur if you only do it 2 times a week rather than if you did it 3 times a week or 4 or 5 times a week, whatever.
Yeah, we have people like feeling changes after one session, and then we have people that you kind of have to tweak their protocol quite a bit, and it might take a bit longer. Like the longest I've seen it take is just a couple months, I think, in my experience. But usually on average, I'd say like, I mean, 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks is usually when with the clients that I've worked with, they start to see results.
The other point that I want to make is that I did not ever do neurofeedback and without talk therapy because I'm a rational motor behavior therapist. And so
Mhm.
basically I use language as a basis for getting into the problems. And I think that anxiety, depression really is a function of depletion of emotional resources. And so
Mhm.
that's where I go. And so I think that makes a more robust benefit for both of those.
Totally.
I do want to point out too, I think, again, we're getting the reports from the providers themselves. So if you have them already, they've been working with a client who's been doing neurofeedback for a while, and then they add in the helmet later, they might feel too that they're seeing these changes. Because I know with my clients, I mean, the first time I put the helmet on them, I definitely saw a change in their EEG when we did neurofeedback afterwards. I don't know if the client felt this like, amazing change that now they've increased their voltage of their alpha, or whatever, but I could see it too. So just, the idea that with those like twice a week and, 2 to 4 sessions and whatnot, could also just be that the provider themselves is seeing this difference too.
I just one more question on your future research that you pointed out. probably the populations would be dementia, TBI, ADHD. Are there any other populations or conditions you think would be the most, or that you would like to see research on based on your?
I think I mean, just for my own personal interest, I think kind of more in the mental health sphere of like depression, anxiety, and PTSD would be very interesting for me. And also just combined modality research, I think, as well, of like having modality one and then PBM combined and then nothing at all. I think those would be my areas of interest.
Are you aware by any chance that the Massachusetts General Hospital has a clinic for photobiomodulation?
Yeah, I did hear about this. Yeah.
I've been attending those rounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're very interesting as well. I know they have some great speakers there.
Really exciting. I mean, it just is booming, the whole industry. It's really exciting.
I think for myself too, one of the, I think just getting some more research, one with kids in general, but especially when we're looking at some of these, pandas kids, these nonverbal autism, especially if like, a kid who started off and they were speaking and they've lost some of these abilities, just ways that we can try to, support children at these young ages and hopefully change the course of their life. I think it would be really amazing. So I personally am definitely hoping there'll be a lot more research with that.
Have you ever heard of anyone using the helmet for a very early age? Because I had, what
Yeah, the youngest I think that we've had was a year and a half.
Really?
Year old was using it. They've had at least 2 3-year-olds. And then I've worked with ages 4 and up in general. But yeah, very young. I mean, the year and a half year old is kind of wild.
And I think, was it Roger who would show if the helmet was too big, he would just hold it and he would just spin it around and hold it. I don't know if you remember that, Patricia, but I remember seeing he either demonstrated that or it was an image he shared, but it's really.
I've forgotten what that piece that comes with the helmet that is like almost like a web. Is that something of, because I've never used that and I didn't really quite know what it was for.
Yeah, the chin strap.
Yeah, is that the one that like buckles at the chin?
I didn't know whether it buckled to the chin, but it just looked like some kind of web that goes over the head that then the helmet would fit on top of, but I have never used it.
Yeah, that's really good for kids and also just anybody who, like, for
Has a
example,
small skull?
yeah, and also just anyone, like, for example, anyone with like autism, for example, they might be moving their head around quite a bit, so it helps to stabilize it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you still have that piece, Patricia? Because you can.
I'm pretty sure I mean, I just keep everything in the, in the container that it came in. So I'm pretty sure I do.
Yeah, I can share a picture of what it can look like if that helps
Please,
you. Yeah.
please. Okay.
All right. If there's no other questions, we can end a bit early. Oh, Patricia, I don't know if your hand is raised for a new question or that's your old hand up.
No, but I must have hit something wrong. So
Okay. No worries. Thank you so much, Nicole and Jordan. That was really, really useful and really interesting. But as a reminder, before we go next month on October 2nd, we'll be joined by Jana Jamail. She'll present her findings on tPBM as an intervention for individuals with treatment-resistant anxiety and depression. So thank you. We hope to see you there, and thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good day, everyone.